good to have you on the call.
Well, I've been meaning to make it. Now I'm retired, so I can start making it.
There you go.
Hey,
So you won't be on the road all the time now?
Well, I still come back and forth to Oklahoma to check on my cows. That's where I'm at now. But
Oh, okay.
I'm not. I don't have a 8 to 5 job right now.
All right.
I'm retired. Actually, I'm on vacation until the end of January. My first actual retirement date is February 1st. But then they want me to come back and contract back, so I may do that. Maybe 2, maybe 3 days a week. We'll see. We'll play it by ear.
that's
Good deal.
not real retirement, Kerry.
Well, I can schedule it so I can work the days I want to work.
Yeah,
It's not Monday through Friday anyway.
yeah.
There you go. Very good. Okay. So, all right. All right. So yeah, we're, if I had kind of looked through things and I might have set it up a little differently just to start it off so that I was preaching behind the readings, but it is what it is. I mean, I mean, when you got 16 chapters to get through, and you got to put in Easter there, and got to get done before everything starts getting slammed at the end when there's special deals and stuff. So, and who knows what they'll look like at this point. So, anyway, so yes, so at this point you're reading behind the sermon, so you have the additional context of the sermon. And honestly, I don't address all the questions in my message. Some of them get informed by that, so it's just it's still good work to do. So, all right. So we are looking at the week's readings beginning the 18th, and so that's chapter 14, which is the text I'll preach on this weekend. So my sermon will actually be from verses 8 to 20, which is when Paul and Barnabas are in Lystra, and they have this. They come in and they heal the man, and the crowds think that they're Zeus and Hermes, and they want to offer sacrifices, and they come in and like, no, don't do that. But as the same as I did this past weekend, I'll give an overview of the whole chapter. So, because this is the second part of the first missionary journey. So, if you, so Paul and Barnabas are leaving, and they shook their feet, shook the dust off their feet in Antioch and Pisidia, and they go on to Iconium, which is about, oh yeah, I have pictures. Hold on a second. I'm going to share my screen and you can see pictures of the map. Here we go. So this is the overall map right here of the first missionary journey. So you can see that it starts in Antioch, which is right here. And then there's the trip across Cyprus, and then north to Perga, which is in Galatia. And then here's Pisidia and Antioch, where we spent most of chapter 13. And they go on to Iconium, which is about 90 miles to the east. And so then they get run out of there and they go to Lystra. And then this Lystra is the segment where I will spend most of the time on Sunday talking about their encounter there. Then they go to Derbe, and Derbe is as far east as they go on this journey on the Galatian segment and Galatian region. And then at the end of the chapter, then they retrace their steps. And so they go back to Lystra, Iconium, Pisidia and Antioch, Perga, and then they sail home, or they sail back to Antioch in Syria. and that completes the loop, and then they're done with the first missionary journey. So, so that's the overall map. Let's see here. So this is the particular map, and all three of these maps are from N.T. Wright's book. This one, the little ones, are from the commentary. That big one was from his biography of Paul. So here you can see they leave Pisidian Antioch, go to Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. And then the final part of the verses 21 to 28, you see them leaving Derbe, going to Lystra, Iconium, Antioch, Perga, and then a little stopover in Italia, and then on to Antioch in Syria. So there you go. That's so just so you have a sort of a geographic understanding of where they're going. Come back here. All right. So
he gets stoned in Iconia, then he comes back through there on his way back, even though they left him for dead, right?
So they right. So he doesn't get they attempt to stone him in Iconium, but they hear about it and they leave.
Oh, okay,
He
that's
does
where they
get
left.
stoned in Lystra.
Okay.
Lystra, they're successful. They leave him they drag him outside the city. They leave him there. So it depends on which commentary you read, but some of them think that maybe he took a big rock to the head and it knocked him out, and then they thought he was dead, so they just moved him out there, and then he came to. So verses 19 and 20, when the Jews come from Antioch, this is Pisidian Antioch and Iconium. So just if you look back at the map, these Jews from Antioch are 90 to 100 miles away, and they're still so mad that they travel across the country here to stir up the Jews in Lystra to revolt against them. And they stone him and they drag him out of the city.
Okay.
So, yeah. So yes, he has the attempted, Iconium has the attempted stoning, and then Lystra, they are successful. And he makes reference to it in 1 Corinthians, I think. There's a hold on. Can't remember where he he makes a reference in one of his letters later to being stoned. I think it's 1 Corinthians 11.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. Oh, and I have to apologize. I was wrong. I talked about last week about John Mark and when John Mark leaves for Jerusalem when they get to Perga. It's not Romans 16. It's actually 2 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul extends an invitation for John Mark to come and says that he's been beneficial. So it's in 2 Timothy chapter 4. I had to look it up and I went, oh, it's not right. Sorry. So I gave you some bad information.
Oh no.
I know. If that's the worst bad information, if that's the worst bad information I ever give you, then we're doing all right.
We're doing fine.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. So the second half of Paul's missionary journey, this first missionary journey, he starts off with the same pattern. He goes to Iconium. He goes first to the Jews. And again, he knows that in a Gentile community that there will be Gentiles and people who are trying to convert to Judaism who will be present. And so verse 1 tells us that he went to the Jewish synagogue and he spoke in such a way that a great number of both the Jews and the Greeks became believers. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against brothers. But they remain for a long time. They speak boldly. They testify to the word of grace and do signs and wonders. And but yet the residents of the city remain divided. So they're still along these lines of, yes, we believe what Paul and Barnabas are talking about, and is, you know, about Jesus. And then there's others who are like, no, they're completely wrong about this. Those who are opposed to them, both Gentiles and Jews, attempt to mistreat them and attempt to stone them. They learn of it and they flee. So they leave Iconium and they go to Lystra and Derbe, and they continue to proclaim the good news. So that's the end of Monday's reading. When they get to Lystra, again, this is 90 miles down the road, right? No, that's Iconium. Lystra is not that far away. Hold on, let me pull my map up again. Yeah, Lystra is just a little
In between the two.
Yeah, so Lystra is just I think like 15 miles, something like that. It's not terribly far away. And they meet a man who has who could not use his feet, has never walked, and has been crippled from birth. So 3 times Luke tells us this guy cannot move anywhere on his own. And he listens to Paul speaking, and Paul looks at him intently, which is the same phrase that Luke used about Peter in chapter 3 when he sees the lame man. It's the same, you know, when he calls him to rise up. So again, it's almost the exact same phrase that Paul uses, that Peter used, to stand up on your feet. And let me see, hold on a second. There's a you know, I just sometimes the idiomatic ways of people, or of languages. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, so I mean, it tells them to stand on your own feet upright. So basically, like, it's this long phrase that's used, but the idea is to rise and to stand up straight, like vertically, as opposed to horizontally, which is probably the position that he was in. So anyway, it's also the word there is also in the same word family as the word for resurrection. Just throwing that out there.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, so it's the Greek word is anastasis. Anyway, it means to rise up. And it has the one of the definitions is to rise from the dead. So the man jumps up and he begins to walk. And immediately upon seeing what has happened, the Lycaonians, they begin to speak in their own language about, they think that the gods have come down in human form. And so they call Barnabas Zeus, and they call Paul Hermes. And they call Paul Hermes because Hermes was the messenger of the Greek gods, and so he was the one who would speak. And so because Paul's the one who's doing all the talking, they call him Hermes. And so then the priest of Zeus comes sort of parading down the street with oxen and these garlands around the oxen's heads, and they come to the gates and they want to offer a sacrifice. And so because they're speaking a different language, Paul and Barnabas don't figure out quite quickly enough to head this off what they're actually trying to do. But as soon as they see the priest and these oxen and their preparations for the sacrifice, they're like, oh, something is going on here and we got to stop this. And so they rush out, they rush into the crowd, and they tear their clothes, which is sort of the universal Jewish sign of repentance, but also of trying to avoid any kind of association with impropriety. And so they're like, if they're gonna think that we're somehow divine, then we've got to stop this right now. So they're gonna go and they're gonna figure this out. So they says, why are you, verse 15 says, why are you doing this? We are mortals just like you, and we bring you good news that you should turn from these worthless things, that would be offering sacrifices to God that don't exist, or that, you know, are nothing, and turn to the living God who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them. In the past generations, he allowed all the nations to follow their own ways, yet he has not left himself without a witness in doing good, giving you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, and filling you with food and your hearts with joy. So in this moment, Paul, supposedly Paul, is speaking to them in a very different way than they did in the synagogues. Because remember, when Paul and Barnabas preach in the synagogue, they can utilize the scriptural metaphors of the Old Testament, and they can utilize that language because they already have that basis of faith underneath them. When they're going and they're speaking to a particularly pagan culture that doesn't have that Jewish faith, they've got to start, one commentary said they have to start one more step back. So they have to go to what people can see and what they've experienced in the world, rather than start from the fact that, you know, they would or assume that they understand what it means for there to be a God who has created this whole world. So they have to step back and say, okay, you see that the rain falls, you see that crops grow, and you see that you're filled with food and your heart's filled with joy. And so he says, you should worship the living God, not, you know, an idol, or not false gods, the one who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that's in them. So so he goes back to creation and saying creation speaks the truth and witnesses and testifies to who God is. And I can let's see. There's some Psalms. Hold on. Let's see. Where am I at here? I was just reading this. So Paul goes on later in Romans 1:19 and 20. He insists that if men and women pay heed to the works of God in creation, they would understand who God is. Let's see. There are several Psalm references. Must be in a different one. Anyway, let me look here. Cross references. Yeah, Psalm 146, verse 6. And then Psalm 65:10. Can look those up. But again, what he's arguing from is from creation. He's arguing from what they can see, and not from a common base of the Jewish history.
Like the Jews being let out of Egypt and all that, they can always
Right.
go back to those as a starting point to how God protects us and always leads us in the right direction, or, you know, takes care of you.
Right. Yeah. They don't have that base to go from, so he's got to go back further. So that's a difference in it's a contextualization of the message of the gospel to who's in front of him. They don't know the Jewish history, so he can't appeal to that. When he goes into the synagogue, they know the Jewish history, so he can appeal to that, and he can layer on top of that Jesus is the fulfillment of that. It seems like this particular moment of explaining who God is gets cut off. Obviously, verse 18 says, even with these words, they scarcely restrain the crowds from offering sacrifices to them. So you might want to encourage your groups to go look at Acts 17, which is Paul in Athens. And when he's speaking to the same kind of crowd in Athens. So it's verses 22 through 31. Paul is in front of the Areopagus, and he's speaking to the Athenians, and he uses this same kind of argument of looking at the God who made the world and everything's in it. He who is the Lord of heaven and earth does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything. And then he goes on to talk about Jesus in that extended thing. And then the Athenians come back at him and go, who's that? So, because the danger that Paul faced in this particular case in Lystra is that if in a pantheistic culture, in a polytheistic culture, if he had just dropped the name Jesus in there as the Son of God, then Jesus would have been placed alongside of all of the other gods that they had shrines to and things like that, and it would have completely undermined the message. So let's see. So he does the best to restrain them from offering sacrifices to them, but so they cut him off from sharing because they want to offer a sacrifice. But then in verse 19, the Jews who've been on the march from Iconium and Antioch, they cut them off, and they win over the crowds, and they're like, these guys are crazy. And so then that's when they stone Paul, drag him out of the city. But then he gets up the next day, and they go on to Derbe. So, all right. Let's see. So they get, we don't get much of what happens in Derbe, but we know that they proclaim the good news, made many disciples, and then they begin the journey back. They go back to Lystra, where they just got run out of. Then they go on to Iconium, where they got run out of. Then they go on to Antioch, where they got run out of. And verse 22 says, they strengthened the souls of the disciples and encouraged them to continue in the faith, saying, it is through many persecutions that we must enter the kingdom of God. So their perseverance in sharing the good news is evident by the fact that they retrace their steps and they go to those fledgling Christian communities in those particular towns, despite whatever personal cost there might have been for them. And then verse 23 says that after they had appointed elders for them in each church with prayer and fasting, they entrusted them to the Lord in whom they had come to believe. So when they don't leave the Christians in these particular communities just off to their own devices. They find people in their community. They've obviously spent at least enough time there to know who's empowered by the Holy Spirit to take a leadership role. And so they've done a little bit of training, and we'll see more of this later in the pastoral epistles in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus about what those qualifications are. But they put somebody in charge of that community and say, here's what you need to do, here's the basics, and then keep going. And they trust that God is going to continue to work. And then the chapter closes out with their passing through Pisidia, which is the region where Antioch is. They come to Pamphylia, which is another region where Perga is. and then they go to Italia, which is the coastal town, and then they set sail from there to Antioch in Syria. And then they make their, they have another church meeting, and they, as all good missionaries do, when they get back from their journeys abroad, they share their travels, and they relate that God had done all that God had done with them, and how he had opened a door of faith for the Gentiles. And they stay there for some time. I would imagine to rest and to attend to any medical issues that they might have had, because while the journeys look like they're it's not terribly far, but there's mountainous terrain, there's obviously the persecution that they endured on that journey, plus the boat travel, all that would have taken its toll on them. So it's a little bit of R&R when they get there. But as we'll see, they're not going to be in the rest and relax mode for very long, because they'll get called over to Jerusalem, and they're going to hash out some stuff in chapter 15. All right, there's your quick overview. But what questions do you have about the events of chapter 14, or about any of the questions that are in there, or things that don't make sense? Or
Question 2 on Tuesday.
Okay. About who else quickly corrected someone who tried to worship them as a god? Yeah. So that's Peter.
Peter, yeah.
With Cornelius, back in chapter 10. So yeah, as soon as Peter shows up, and then
He wanted to bow to him. He said, "No, I'm
right.
Just like you are." Yeah.
Right. So and again, it's almost the same language there that Paul uses. So yeah, you can go back to it's 10, like 30 something.
When he had the dream about the sheep and all, and then
that was fun.
he could break bread with the Gentiles, and then he shows up and he bows down.
Yep. Let's see. Let's see, where am I at here? Yeah, it's 10, starting in verse 25, says, on Peter's arrival, Cornelius met him, and falling at his feet, worshipped him. But Peter made him get up, saying, stand up, I'm only a mortal. So yeah, 10:25 and 26. Yep, it's almost the exact same phrasing.
So when Peter was healing folks, I mean, the Jews wanted him to quit talking about Jesus. They're trying to figure out what to do with him, whether it's imprison him or what they're going to do with him. Mm-hmm. But here it looks like I guess the Jews have kind of backed off that. They just run them out of town instead of throwing them in jail. They just try to stone them and talk bad about them and try to push them on out of town to get them to move on instead of locking them up.
Yeah, it seems like they don't want to have to deal with him for a long period of time. They just want to,
let him go to the next town. Let them work with him.
yeah. Just keep moving along. It's probably more along the lines of he's disrupting the peace. And so if they can move him along, if they can get this guy out of here, and then restore some semblance of order in their community. Because again, in this particular context, these places are very localized. I mean, everybody knew everybody, and if somebody was causing a disturbance, everybody knew about it, and then all of a sudden, you get a bunch of people that are, in an uproar about something, then whoever the local government is has got a mess on their hands to try to clean up. So they find the agitator, and they're like, "All right, you're done."
Yeah. Well, they keep letting him talk at the or speak at the synagogues.
Right. Yeah. If there's a synagogue, yeah, then they give him the floor, which again, that's I think that goes back to how well known Paul was in the Jewish community at large. That he was known as a scholar, he was known as an upright Jewish person, and then they invite him to talk, and then he turns the tables on them.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. Mhm. But more and more, he's going to be going into Gentile places where the Jewish communities, where there are Jewish communities because of the the dispersion, the diaspora. But more and more, he's going to be speaking to people who don't have that connection to the Jewish faith. So, like Athens, Corinth, and he's going to be going to places that are much more polytheistic, where lots and lots of different deities of some kind are revered and worshipped, and there's temples all over the place. Like, even in Ephesus, I mean, Ephesus is known as the place where Artemis, the god Artemis, lives, and so they have the temple to Artemis, and yeah. So anyway, we'll get there. Don't you worry.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. All right. What else?
Do you have any kind of idea of what kind of time frame this journey took? Is there a timetable kind of shows the length
So
of time?
it's as best folks can put it together, it's about a 11 to 12 year period of time from about 46 to 57, depending on when he started in 46 and when he finished in 57. But
You're talking the whole out and back.
for all three journeys. That's all three journeys. For the first missionary journey, took a little over a year, right at a year, a little over a year, because we don't know how much some time was in Antioch and in Syria at the end of it, and we don't really know how long they stayed in Derbe or how long they stayed in any of the places. But generally, it's understood that the first missionary journey took about a year, and then the second missionary journey took a couple 3 years. And let me see here. Where did I? Hold on. Maybe it was in the back of me. Yeah, so first missionary journey about 46 to 48-ish. Second missionary journey 49 to 52. And then the third missionary journey 53 to 57. And then his trip to Rome somewhere around 59 to 60. And then who knows how long he's actually, I mean, I guess he's in Rome about like, what is it? Is it 64 that typically he's understood to be martyred? So, anyway. And so one of the things, so the region that he's in for the first missionary journey is the region of Galatia. And so they think that he wrote, some scholars think that he wrote the letter to the Galatians when he got back to Antioch in Syria, around 40, 49 or 48. So if he, so since he had just been there, he's sending them that advice. So So I'll be reading some of the benediction words from the letter to the Galatians. And if he did write it at that particular time from Antioch, when you read the opening of the letter to the Galatians, you see that he's upset with them because some people have come in and like subverted what he's saying, which sort of is testified to in the work that he's done with them, that every place he went, the Jews came in and were like, no, he's wrong. You got it,
Yeah.
or tried to add on some other things. So it makes sense that he would write that letter in that particular time frame to those folks. So, yeah, I'm going to have some. My benediction for this week will be from Galatians.
We did like a 13-week study called what was it called? The Truth Project. You ever hear of that?
Mm-mm.
It was done by Focus on the Family, but it's been done several years ago. But it was just amazing how all through history, how you can change one word and it changed the whole meaning of something that's said. So I can imagine there's a lot of that. No, it hurt, this is what,
Mm-hmm.
A good example they used was, Christopher Columbus, discovered America, saying, he came for good, but really he was looking for, religious freedom, but they don't teach that in school, so, but there's a lot of just taking one little word and twisting it.
Mm-hmm.
That can take people a whole different direction than meaning of it. So I'm sure they did a lot of that.
Sure. So, and again, in that culture where the community that you lived in was your everything. I mean, there wasn't, people weren't traveling all over the place. Most people didn't do that. If you're extremely wealthy, yeah, you did. Or if you were some kind of merchant and you were on your way through different places, then yeah, you traveled. But when your local community was the place that you were born, grew up, and died, you put a lot of stock in those who were the officials in that particular place, and you put a stock in what they had to say. And so some itinerant preacher comes through town and is like, hey, here's something new to believe, if it may have the effect of, I don't know if I have no idea if that's the origin of the whole snake oil kind of deal, but the snake oil salesman's like, hey, it's the cure for everything, and and then they gather up all the money,
Yeah.
and they're gone the next day. It's kind of like, hey, wait a minute. So all right, what else? What other questions or insights? Or anything you want to ask about chapter 14? Or any questions or clarifications for chapter 13? If y'all haven't thought about it yet.
Just a comment, I guess, about, they did, talking about, I guess, the last question, the second question on Thursday. Why is it important for leaders to entrust others with important work of leading the day-to-day operations?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that kind of goes back to what you're saying. I mean, he had to find some people that were very committed, because they were going to be questioned every day and threatened probably if they weren't saying what they went against the grain, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think Paul also understood that he might never see these folks again. He might correspond with them via letters. Obviously, we have those written records, but he knew that the folks in that community were going to be the ones who had the boots on the ground kind of deal. And he also knew that his calling wasn't to be, for lack of a better way of saying it, a local church pastor. I mean, his calling was to be an evangelist, to share the good news to all the places that he was going. but he knew that there were people in those communities who had received that good news and had been transformed by it, who could then help others do that. So, he knew that if the mission was going to continue for the long term, that there needed to be local people. They needed that day-to-day operations kind of person. And usually it's actually a team of people. It's always a group of elders. It's usually not just one particular person. So like in Antioch, when back at the beginning of chapter 13, you see, there's prophets and teachers, or prophets and what do you say? There's prophets and teachers, yeah. Barnabas, Simeon, Lucius, Manaen, and Saul. I mean, there's 5. So it's not just everything's weighing on one particular person. It's this group of people who are working together. And then they set aside Paul and Barnabas to go as evangelists. So, and if you think about it, if Saul and Barnabas were the ones who were like, we think of them as like the New Testament rock stars. They're like, they're the ones that gather up the crowds and everything. If you're the local church that has to send off your rock stars to some other place, how does that make you feel? It's kind of like, oh, wait, we're going to send our best players to somewhere else? Wait, what? Think about the world of sports and things like that. You want to gather up the superstars, keep them.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Yeah. Okay, what else? Oof. Does everybody, Carrie, does everybody in your group have a book? You need to set some out, or good to go?
We picked up, I think, 4. I need to check share, but I'm not sure if everybody got one. We kind of disbanded for Christmas and all, and we haven't got back yet together as a group. So this may be the first week. I'm not sure it'd be better with that than I would.
Okay. Just let us know. We've got plenty here in the office. So
okay.
Just let us know, or have them call and say, hey, I need to come pick one up.
Okay. We'll send out a text. We'll send out a text today. Make sure.
Good deal.
Our group is, some wants to meet face to face. Some will not meet face to face until, I guess, COVID is completely over. So it's been kind of a mixed group. But the ones that have jobs that they're doing Zoom meetings every day, they don't want to. they get tired of it. Which, I mean, like Terry Harrington. I mean, she's teaching through it and everything. So it's been kind of hard to get everybody on the back together. So, but we'll get there.
All right. Good deal. All right, Sandy, any other questions from?
No, I think we're ready.
Okay. Well, let me know if my friend wants to ask any questions.
She was the one that was very upset. Now, we're not going to discuss the sermon, and we were already 55 minutes into our class.
Goodness.
We were at the end of our James Moore, and I said, well, it's up to you all if you want to discuss the sermon, but I have it in the plans as we do it after we do our reading for this.
Yeah.
So, and to try to get my class to read ahead, like we the teachers have to read ahead.
Right.
Not going to happen.
Okay. They just can't look at the date and just disregard it.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No.
That's all right. It's quite all right. It's whatever works for your group. So
okay.
It doesn't bother me either way. Very good. All right. Well, I appreciate your time this afternoon. And if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I'll send the email with the link to the replay for everybody here in just a little bit, once it gets done processing on the YouTube. So very good. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.